Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to apologize right up front. I just got over a cold, which I mentioned at the beginning. So I got my voice back this morning, but if I sound a little strange or start coughing, I apologize. Um, so I am going to be talking about learning a second programming language now that you've already learned your first, and how to leverage the skills that you've already learned. Okay. All right. So know what works for you. I think it's really important to remember how you learned your first language. You kind of start off not knowing where to go in the beginning when you are learning your first language, but now that you've already taken that leap, you know how you learn best. Remember why you want to learn. Are you just looking for, something to up your game a little bit? Are you really interested in this language? Keep that in mind so that you have a reason to learn. Next, you need to remember to let everything soak in. Even though you kind of start off and you're like, oh, okay, so I know what I'm doing, or maybe it's very similar to a language you've already learned, you need to take time to process everything because the syntax can be very similar, but that can also kind of throw you off. So just take the time that you need and let that soak in, which kind of corresponds with my next point. Remember that you need to learn the basics, even if it seems like a review. There, like I said, the syntax, like I learned Ruby and then I jumped into Swift for iOS, and it seemed so similar. But then there was something little with the syntax that, oh, I can do that in Ruby, but I can't do that with Swift. So just go over the basics no matter how long it takes, or if it seems like all review. Okay. Keep in mind that this stuff is hard. It was super hard the first time you learned a language, but your second language is going to be hard too, because there's always those differences that are going to trick you up, or maybe it's the things that are similar that kind of trip you up. So just remember that it's going to be hard for you, but you are smart because you already did this once. So keep in mind the things that I'm going to run down through here and you'll be good to go. First, make that time commitment to code every day. That's super important, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes to look over code that you did yesterday and say, oh, I should have done it this way instead of that way, and make the little changes. Find a good reference. Cheat sheets are good. Just something that gives you the basics of whatever language you're learning at the time. And of course the docs. They can be daunting sometimes. I know iOS docs are a pain. It's not like Ruby. I don't know. There's just Ruby docs are super easy to read, and you go to Apple's website and try to read through the docs, and it's like, what are they talking about? But so in the beginning, it's going to be really hard, but you want to keep going back to that and looking over it. Find a mentor or a group, because someone to talk to when you get stuck is super important. I learned that in Firehose. Just talking it out with somebody, even if they didn't have the answer for me, a lot of the times, you can go to them and say, this is what's going on, and talk it through, and then bam, the answer comes to you. So make sure you have someone that can mentor you. Find reputable tutorials. There is a lot of junk out there that can kind of lead you down the wrong path. So make sure that you're finding the right tutorials that, someone that has a blog up on WordPress may not be the best as someone that has a good blog up that's selling a lot of merchandise and you see their name everywhere. So keep that in mind. Another really important thing is to go back and solve challenges and algorithms that you've solved in your first language, because at least you know where you're going. And that can kind of give you a clue of how to solve it with your new language that you're trying to learn. And then allow yourself to get frustrated just a little bit. I guess the best thing is for you to sit there and kind of mull it over, have your rubber ducky sitting there or whatever you talk to and talk it out and let yourself get frustrated just to the point where, you have to walk away. And then when you come back, you're going to be good to go and more determined to figure out the problem. All right. Next, build. So start out by building something small. Might not be very impressive, but once you get that first little app in, you'll be determined to move on to something more difficult. So something difficult can be something that's challenging to you, but maybe not someone else that's more experienced. But just keep moving up, get something a little more difficult each time that you start building your apps. And then build a passion project. That's really important. When I got the job in iOS, that is actually what I started. They said, okay, start building something that's important to you. Like, well, I have no idea. Just, think of something that would mean something to you and start doing it. And pretty soon you'll have all kinds of ideas that you can work off of, and that'll help you to kind of keep going. Read and study. It's like you're back in high school, college, whatever you did. You want to immerse yourself in someone else's code, first of all. You get on GitHub or go to open source projects and find someone's code that's out there. Critique it. Look at it and say, yeah, I wouldn't have done it that way, or wow, that's pretty cool. I wouldn't have thought of doing it that way. So get in there and look at other people's code. Move out of your comfort zone and read about topics that you're not ready for necessarily, but you want to learn about. Listen to notable speakers on topics of interest. So if there's a topic that you're interested in, go find something on the internet that you can listen to while you're cooking or whatever. Attend conferences. There's tons of conferences for everything out there now. So if something comes to your city, hop into one and get the most out of it that you can. Okay. Okay, so you want to join in. Don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be afraid to give answers. So I just last week posted my first response on Stack Overflow. I was super proud of myself because I've always been afraid to give the wrong answer. So just get in there and ask questions and give answers, and someone else is going to have a better answer than you, but at least you attempted. Then get involved. Teach someone and contribute to open source projects. That is the best way to learn, is to teach someone. Even at my job now, I am the most newbie in that at my job, and I've taught people things, and you wouldn't think that you were able to, but give it a shot. What's it going to hurt? And last, celebrate every little accomplishment. It's important to give yourself that little push and just say, yeah, I did that, and be proud of the work that you did. So that is all I have. Does anyone have questions?
Have you submitted anything to the App Store yet?
I have not.
No?
No.
Have you talked with the developers? I know a couple guys who have submitted stuff, and they say Apple's stuff is very stringent for what they allow in, like not even if it's malicious or anything like that, but if it's bad code practices and they make you do a bunch of revisions, if you have any old code that doesn't work anymore, they make you take it out. I'm
Yeah.
curious if it's still that case.
Yes, it absolutely is. I've actually been, since I started there, I've been on a project that's an internal project. So I'm building an app for our head salesperson. But everybody that I talk to, they're like, no, don't do it that way. Even though it's just an internal app, you have to get used to following Apple's guidelines. So they're very much like that.
Did you start learning Swift because of work, or was that the goal all along?
Well, so I interviewed for the Rails job at this at the company I'm with, and in my interview they said, "Well, would you be willing to learn iOS?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, yeah, they had already hired the Rails developer they wanted, but so I just kind of got thrown in.
What did you find the main differences? I guess what you ever struggled with the most, coming from finishing learning Ruby to now having to learn Swift?
It's not so much Swift that's different. I mean, between Ruby and Swift, there's a lot of similarities because it's object-oriented programming, and
okay.
But it's the iOS side of it. Everything is different. The design, how you code is just completely different. So
specifically for Swift and iOS, like with web development, there's frameworks that sort of do a lot of the work for you. Are there frameworks that you need to learn in Swift, or is it just you learn the APIs of the Apple and you just use them?
So there are some out there. It's not like you have gems so much that, but there are like CocoaPods, and there's frameworks out there that you can use. It's just not as much, I guess.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like the talk. I'm actually going to take a stab at Elm, mainly because I want to learn a different, like something not object oriented, right? Something more functional. But I can relate to a lot of the points that you touched on. Like you have to kind of go back to that early pain of learning something new.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. But that was real cool. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.